Brian from Orlando. I was recently listening to Jim Ross and Conrad's podcast, and they were discussing why Pat Patterson left WWE in 2004. I see you're getting the same recommended clips on your YouTube sidebar as I am. So, they believed it was because of Triple H and his being overpushed. I've also heard that Triple H was very critical of The Rock, trying to derail his push in the late 90s. Have you heard this before, and can you give more information about him leaving in 2004? Also, had Triple H derailed The Rock's push, would he have gone on to become the star that he has become? The Rock thing, I think, is pretty common knowledge that Triple H was jealous of him. There was a professional jealousy there. I don't know, it might have gone both ways, but definitely, I absolutely 100% believe, and no, I wasn't there, but I 100% believe that Triple H had a professional jealousy of The Rock. Absolutely. How could he not? I mean, they were both coming up at the same time as these young potential future headliners for the company. Rock was getting pushed harder and faster than Triple H was. Triple H, look, The Rock won his first world title a year before Triple H did, and Triple H had been wrestling longer. He had been in the company longer. So I've always gotten the vibe that Triple H was jealous of The Rock. I think that, I'm sure it was something that was not exclusive to Triple H and The Rock, and it was very common in wrestling. It's not just Triple H is unique in that respect. I mean, Hogan, for God's sake, spent a whole career doing what he had to do to stay on top by his own admission. He has since admitted it. Some of these things are just way too obvious. And as far as him doing things or saying things to hold Rock down, another example that comes to mind are the stories about Shawn and Triple H, both trying to convince Vince McMahon The Rock is not ready to be in the WrestleMania main event, trying to talk Vince out of having Rock wrestle Austin at WrestleMania 15. They were pushing for Foley. They were pushing for Mankind. And Vince stood his ground, and in the end, we got Austin and Rock. And who knows if we would have gotten the kind of Austin and Rock legendary feud between them that we ended up getting had Shawn Michaels and Triple H at that time in 99 gotten their way and gotten in Vince's ear and convinced him that, hey, this kid's not ready for that spot yet. Triple H had never been in a WrestleMania main event before. You don't think that bothered him, that The Rock was going to be in the WrestleMania main event? You're out of your mind. Now, would The Rock have gone on to become the big star he was in WWE and the big star that he is today in Hollywood and all that, had his push been derailed? I think The Rock is such a naturally charismatic guy that I think he would have been fine either way. He would have been a big star no matter what. Now, I heard the same story on JR's podcast that you did, and you'll notice after Conrad reads the reports to him, JR did not refute any of that stuff. I'm talking now about the Triple H and Pat Patterson stuff that I'm going to get into here. He didn't refute it. The Torch report from Wade Keller, which is what Conrad was reading from and referencing, I had heard that Patterson resigned from the company and then he came back the following year. So I knew that, but I was not up on all the details about why. So after I heard the clip and I heard the, JR talking about it on his podcast, I went and I dug up the original report from the Torch newsletter in October of 2004 when Patterson left the company. As the story goes, Vince McMahon sent Pat Patterson, his right-hand man, one of his lieutenants, he sent Patterson on the road to evaluate the Monday Night Raw roster. They were in the midst of that first roster split. Raw was basically the Triple H show. These are the dark days of the reign of terror on Monday Night Raw of Triple H, or the tail end of it. And things were not going great on tickets or whatever, so he sent Patterson on the road to take status reports and report back to him on what's going on here. What is the problem with Raw? What is the problem with the product? And Patterson's conclusion at the end of his evaluation was that Triple H was the problem. Building the Raw brand around Triple H, in his view, was hurting the company. And that includes his failure to elevate new talents to a top level, the report said, like Chris Benoit and Eugene. being the two names, or two of the names anyway, cited. And I have to stop there and say that in Triple H's defense, he put Chris Benoit over in the main event earlier that year of WrestleMania in the best way he possibly could have. He tapped out in the middle of the ring at Madison Square Garden. He submitted to Chris Benoit. And as far as Eugene is concerned, some characters are not meant to be main eventers. Maybe Nick Dinsmore could have been a main eventer had his career taken a different path, maybe with a different gimmick. I always heard what a great wrestler Nick Dinsmore was. He was very well respected. But the idea of Eugene failing to get over at a main event level, and this is somehow Triple H's fault? I mean, come on. You're going to put that on Triple H? I mean, why don't you blame Pearl Harbor on Triple H too? Let's see, what other world events can we blame Triple H for? The Challenger explosion in '86? Did Triple H fuck around with the circuit breakers on the rocket ship? Was that his fault too? I mean, come on. Now, the report used them as examples of people who were discarded once their feud with Triple H was over and it had played out. You could make that argument that they feuded with this top guy and they were cast aside like mid-carders after, the feud was over. But again, was that Triple H's fault? I mean, that to me, especially the Eugene thing, I would not cite him. That to me is a stretch. But one wrestler in this report, one wrestler at the time said, sure, Hunter does jobs, but he doesn't elevate anyone, which I think is a fair point. Now, he did with Batista the following year in 2005, but not many other people. Now, you guys know I'm not fond of that Triple H reign of terror period on Raw from, whatever it was, 02 to 04, 03 to 04. It's to me, until the last couple of years where Raw has just become almost unwatchable, it was my least favorite period ever of Monday Night Raw. So this is not a problem that was limited to 2004. It was 2003, 2004, a year before Patterson presented his report to Vince McMahon. Okay, we're going back a year now. A group of road agents, and he doesn't name in the report who these road agents were, planned to go to Vince to let him know what they thought the problem was, and that they thought the problem, even a year earlier, was Triple H. But then they get to the meeting, and guess who's in the meeting? Stephanie McMahon. And so they chickened out, and nobody spoke up in the meeting. They had this plan. We're going to march in there. We're going to tell Vince what we think. It's Triple H. And they see Triple H's wife, or his soon-to-be wife. I think they got married that year, so I don't know if they were already married or about to get married. His wife or fiance, whatever. They see her sitting in there. What are you going to do? You're going to talk shit about this guy now in front of his wife? You don't think that's going to get back to Triple H? He'll be out of a job. So they chickened out and nobody spoke up. A year later, same deal. Patterson comes to meet with Vince. He's going to, present to him his full report and his full thoughts on what he thinks the problem is. He gets to the meeting, and who is in the meeting? Stephanie McMahon. Stephanie McMahon. And this time, not only is Stephanie in the meeting, but Triple H himself is in the meeting. And to Pat Patterson's credit, he went full steam ahead. He did not let that stop him. He did not let that deter him from telling Vince the truth, from telling Vince what he thought. And this had to be awkward as all hell. He proceeds to tell Vince McMahon that the problem is Triple H. And what an awkward meeting that must have been. And that's when he made an enemy out of Triple H, and Triple H wanted him gone. Things were always tense. There were always reports and stories about tensions between Pat Patterson and Triple H. Going back to when, because Patterson was a big Rock guy. He was a big advocate of The Rock. And so he was kind of like The Rock's guy. Triple H felt that, Rock being Patterson's boy worked against him. When the two of them were fighting for that spot at the top of the card. Going back to that professional jealousy I was just talking about. And Pat Patterson also didn't like it when Triple H would talk shit about Rock's matches backstage in front of other people. And that reminds me of another famous Triple H story, the Jerry Briscoe story. I'm pretty sure I've told this one before. There's a meeting backstage. I don't know if it's a production meeting or a booking meeting, whatever it is. And Triple H is in on the meeting because even then, in 2000, this happened in the year 2000, even back then, Triple H was allowed to sit in on those meetings. And he's talking about why he thinks Kurt Angle is too small, because they want to put the championship on Kurt. They're going to have The Rock put over Kurt Angle, and Kurt Angle is going to win the WWF title. And Triple H is in this meeting, as if he doesn't have a conflict of interest here. And he's trying to convince these agents and Vince and whoever else is in the meeting that, look, this guy is too small. Nobody's going to buy into him as being the champion. And Jerry Briscoe could take no more. Jerry Briscoe speaks up, and he suggests, well, why don't you two have a shoot fight and see how much his being small works against him? And Triple H backed down. He shut up. So the point is, Triple H and Pat Patterson, by all accounts, they were never really fond of each other. I mean, maybe now they're bosom buddies, but back then they were not fond of each other. Vince McMahon, either he did not agree with Patterson's conclusion or he sided with Hunter. Whatever happened, Patterson felt very slighted by this because he was very close to Vince long before Triple H came along. And Vince, I guess maybe he felt Vince was taking his son-in-law's side. He felt slighted, and so he decided to resign. He decided to leave. And a lot of people figured, well, once cooler heads prevail, he'll come back. And sure enough, 6 months later, guess who came back? Pat Patterson.